Joining me now is Danya Perry, a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, and Andrew Weissman, former FBI general counsel and member of special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, also co-host of the indispensable MSNBC podcast, Prosecuting Donald Trump. Danya and Andrew, I found this to be a shocking sort of revelation here, and I don't know whether I should put my eyes back in my head here, but the suggestion that a Trump-affiliated lawyer did not recuse himself or get off of this case for a conflict of interest here, but that B, the minute Yuscil Taveras no longer has his Trump lawyer, he flips. How do you read this, Andrew?
So I think the reference to Cassidy Hutchinson is such a good one because I think that it educates people on what is happening here in this case. But as Danya and I know and are jaded, this happens in the special counsel Mueller investigation. It happened in Enron. It happened in organized crime cases. This is a standard problem when you are a prosecutor of House counsel. And the problem that money sort of buys influence. Now, just to be clear, there are some lawyers who can be paid by a company and they do their job. Yeah. They represent the individual, and that's what they're supposed to do. But I'll give you one quick example. In Enron, there was a junior person. The company paid for that person's counsel. When we finished the interview, I remember that person's lawyer turned to the general counsel of Merrill Lynch and said, "It's been an honor representing you."
Wow.
And I remember going, that's the problem. That's the issue.
In that case, did the junior staffer not, like, sort of understand the dynamic at play?
So you have to remember what's really hard for somebody who's not experienced with the legal system. They get a lawyer and the lawyer is giving them advice and saying, this is what you need to do, and the company is paying for it, and we're taking care of you. They don't have a reason to be thinking this is a problem where there's an issue and they have the company saying this is their standard procedure. You know, it takes somebody with sort of Cassidy Hutchinson's moral integrity. Here, the chief judge in D.C. interceded to say you should at least speak to independent counsel before you make a decision that you want to
that seems like a critical step.
Absolutely. By the way, that happens in mob cases a lot. And of course, what happens is as soon as somebody gets independent counsel and advises them, the person's like, aha, okay, now I got it, that this person may not have my best interests at heart. They may be passing on what I'm saying to somebody else. I mean, there are all sorts of concerns. And that's why, you know, more often than not, especially when the government's saying there's a potential conflict, responsible counsel says, you know what, then I'm out. Get somebody else.
Well, the key phrase there is responsible counsel here, Danya. Stanley Woodward is still defending Walt Nauta. And there is the possibility now that one of his former clients, Yuscil Taveras, will be testifying against one of his current clients, Walt Nauta, because they're taking opposite approaches with regards to this case. One is cooperating with the feds, one is not. So what is that? How does that work that Stanley Woodward can't be conflicted out of this?
As well as, let's not forget, two other witnesses who are at issue in this very same case and that were the subjects of the government motion for this, what's known as a Garcia hearing or a Curcio hearing, different words for the same thing, which is a hearing in front of the judge where she will decide, first of all, will appoint independent counsel, and the witnesses and defendants can decide, but she ultimately may have to make a decision as to whether there's a fatal conflict. So Mr. Woodward in this case actually agreed, as he had to, that there should be such a hearing. What he then did was went on offense and said, actually, the remedy here, because it's for the judge to decide what the appropriate remedy is, and she has a host of possible remedies at her disposal. What he said, Mr. Woodward, is, don't get me off this case. Don't get conflict counsel in this case. No, preclude the testimony of these witnesses.
Of Yuscil Taveras.
Throw out he thinks
Yuscil Taveras is the central witness in the superseding indictment, Andrew.
On the obstruction,
On the obstruction piece. That is a huge deal, effectively, that a Trump paid-for lawyer, I got to keep saying that, someone affiliated with Trump World is saying, don't take me off this case, even though my conflicts of interest are so plainly obvious. Get rid of the guy that's causing the conflict of interest.
Yeah, so just to be clear, to Danya's point, that's not the law. I mean, this is one where, obviously, Judge Cannon has made a lot of wrong decisions, but this is one, if she were to rule that this is testimony that's precluded, she will be reversed. That's just
you
not.
sound very confident in that.
Not a case.
This is absolutely black letter law. No way that gets suppressed because he has a conflict. Okay. And there's actually different ways, assuming she thinks that this is, that he can still stay on the case. One way to deal with this is that Mr. Woodward cannot cross-examine either a current or former client. You have a continuing duty of loyalty. So one way to deal with that is to say that local counsel will have to do that. But the other is...
But that, I mean, you effectively have to wall off that local... I mean, how does that work?
You know, you always say you're not a lawyer, but you are.
It's like, I'm television law school, but
exactly.
I mean, how do you wall off your co-counsel? I'm not going to tell you what I learned when I was representing Yuscil Taveras, and I'm certainly not going to tell the guy who's paying the bills what may be going on here.
So the legal system has not solved that Rubik's Cube of sort of what do you do there. The assumption is you cannot use anything you learned from a current or former client so that the other counsel is walled off and has to do the cross-examination. Now, there's no way to police that.
How is this not witness tampering, Danya? I mean, I just, on its face, for the layman, Donald Trump's PAC is paying for these specific co-defendants' legal fees, right? These lawyers are apparently encouraging their clients to take positions that are most beneficial to Donald Trump. Is it not witness tampering because these co-defendants are willingly entering into these agreements with counsel? I mean, how is this allowed?
Well, as Andrew said, we're both aware of, and there are no doubt countless examples where one lawyer can ethically and responsibly represent two clients. Usually not when they're at such cross purposes. That just becomes difficult, and a lot of lawyers would recuse themselves in that event, so as not to pit one client against another or risk the betrayal of confidences. But the law allows for that. The law also allows for, you know, the top dog, the pay for counsel for his employees or his lieutenants. That is all allowed. The law presumes the ethical conduct of lawyers who are officers of the court.
That's the mistake, presuming ethical conduct from lawyers. No, I'm not going to besmirch all lawyers everywhere, but that doesn't seem to be what's happening here. I will ask you, Andrew, as someone who has seen, you know, lower level defendants flip. If I'm Carlos de Oliveira or maybe even Walt Nauta in this case, and I see my buddy Yuscil Taveras, who allegedly was in the same room with me doing all this, flip after he gets his own independent counsel, is that not a catalytic event for getting those other defendants to flip?
So I'll give you another example. So in mob cases, this is what happened with Sammy Gravano, the underboss of the Gambino family, when he's thinking, you know what? I know my counsel is really aligned in interest with John Gotti, the boss. So he got word to be able to go to the judge and say, I need to talk to an independent counsel, and I don't trust that if I go to my own counsel that I'm going to get the right advice. In that situation, it could be that I'll get killed if I say I'm thinking of cooperating. And that's the reason here you see that Judge Boasberg, the chief judge in D.C., got involved, because this is one where the special counsel really looks so ethical and proper. They alerted the defense counsel, they alerted the judge overseeing the grand jury to the potential conflict. They actually alerted Judge Cannon in Florida, so she would be aware of what was happening in D.C. They say they did that in sealed proceedings. So they made sure everyone was aware of what was going on. And then Judge Boasberg did the right thing, which was to say, you know what, before you make a decision as to what is in your interest, I want to see that you've talked to somebody who is conflict-free. And they went to the federal defenders, who are, you know, in our experience, are really wonderful lawyers. A lot of people think just because they're free, somehow they're not good. They tend to be really excellent counsel. And that's what you saw happen. And, you know, what you're putting your finger on, and what is unfortunate, is this is so common in any case where there is a crime that's committed by a group and there's a real hierarchy. And it's just it's a real problem in the law. As I said, it's in mob cases, it's in corporate cases, it's in public corruption cases.
I would assume, Danya, that the hierarchy really matters here, because Trump's not paying for his lawyers legal fees in other federal indictments, presumably because they're on their own for whatever reason. But it's precisely the people with no background in the law, the IT guy, the grounds guy, the valet, who he clearly seems to be trying to manipulate in terms of taking a less adversarial position. At some point, I mean, what's your assessment of how damaging this flip is to the other co-defendants in the case?
As your question seems to imply, there can be a domino effect, and a defendant could well see, well, this guy has flipped, and he is actually not indicted next to me in this charging instrument. So maybe that was a good decision to get independent counsel. And, oh, now I see that this judge will appoint a federal defender or some other attorney, so let me explore that. That certainly happens. And that certainly can be advantageous for the one who's left behind.
Yeah. Also, the federal public defenders are free, right? You don't have to take money from Trump's PAC to get adequate legal representation, if you're watching, anyone out there. Danya Perry, thank you so much for joining me. As always, Andrew Weissman, we can never let you go after just one discussion. There is so much more to